Okie doke.
Hello, this is Community Matters. I'm your host, Becky Steinbrunner, and I want to welcome you all to the show today. We're honored to have some really excellent guests on our program, and the first being today is Mr. Brian Peoples from Trail Now. I have him on the phone. Can you hear me okay, Brian?
I can hear you very well, Becky.
Okay,
How am I coming across?
very nicely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us here today, Brian. I know you've got a very busy schedule, traveling and everything, and I really want to thank you for taking time to be with us and to apologize for last Friday when we had to abruptly cancel our program due to some health issues within the studio, but that's all been cleared up. So thank you very much. Let's begin right away because I want to take full advantage of our time with you here today. Brian Peoples, you began a group called Trail Now. Please, for our listeners, I've known you for a long time and have admired and respected your work very much. But for our listeners who may not know who you are, please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Becky. Yeah. I've Brian Peoples, and our organization's called Trail Now, and we're a local organization with thousands of supporters that follow us on Facebook, follow us on our newsletter, and our objective is to build the Santa Cruz Coastal Trail from Watsonville to Davenport in a timely, cost-effective, and eco-friendly manner. And so that's our goal. And specifically, it's to rail bank the tracks and build the trail where the tracks are, because that's the fastest way, least expensive, and environmentally friendly. And that's basically our organization.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And you've been operative for quite a number of years. What got you started in this, and what has kept you fighting at this place?
Yeah, thanks, Becky. I'm an engineer for a local tech company, and on the side, I've been involved in transportation policy for over 25 years. Really, I am an advocate of smart transportation solutions. And as an engineer, I apply an engineering approach to what makes the most sense. So I would say it's basically to get us moving, and it frustrated me that our community sits in traffic and we have this phenomenal corridor that we could use as a transportation resource. And so that's really what's been driving me.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. It's been a long time. You know, the Regional Transportation Commission purchased the Santa Cruz Branch Rail Line in 2012 and has been doing studies ad nauseum ever since. But now we have in our laps finally a feasibility study of a passenger rail. The Monterey Bay Scenic Trail was added on to the component of passenger rail for the corridor. And many people are arguing, is there room for both? And I'm hearing from you that you think a trail is the best use of this rail corridor. Talk with us about that and relate it to what we're hearing in the news now from the RTC, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely the corridor, in some areas, it's only 27 feet wide. So it's not wide enough for a passenger rail that can reach up to speeds of 60 miles an hour along our neighborhoods. And when you compare a train to using it as a simple trail, the difference is significant in the number of users. So let me give you an example. The study came out and it showed for the train, it would be 1,500 people using it. So they call it boarding, 33,000 to 4,500, maybe 6,000 in 2050 or 2045, right? Boardings is one person taking a trip twice.
Mm.
So that's essentially one person, so about 1,500. If we look at the existing trail as it is on the west side, and you look at the peak commute hours, during the peak commute hours, if our entire corridor was built out as a trail, and a trail like a highway where you separate fast-moving people from slow-moving pedestrians, you could have 2,000 people an hour using that corridor. And that's equivalent to a single highway lane. A single highway lane, if you measure it, it's 2,000 people an hour. So think about the increased mobility for our community if we had this corridor opened up along the coast that we could use today as a transportation resource. So the short answer is a train and trail cannot coexist. We've already seen it. The report's already come out and verified that. And the best use of that, the most cost effective and the most effective at moving people, is just basically to build a trail on the existing railroad bed.
I've heard many people say, well, how could people, if the goal is really to reduce traffic congestion on Highway 1. I mean, in my mind, that's not the only goal, but if that is one of the main goals, would the people who sit in that traffic every morning and night to get home to Watsonville and beyond, would they really ride their bikes? Or, the whole electric bike has changed things, but do you think they would realistically use the corridor to get to their work and school in Santa Cruz, coming from Watsonville?
Well, let me start out by saying those same people would be even less likely to use a train, because most of them, they're going to their job. The train would not even go where they need to go. But having said that, we do believe there will be a significant amount of users, as you mentioned, with electric bikes. But more importantly, like me, I live in Aptos, okay? Rather than me driving to Capitola, if I was going to Capitola, I could ride my bike. So rather than me driving on the highway, I ride my bike. And that opens up capacity for somebody in Watsonville who needs to drive. And so the way to look at it is systems engineering. And systems engineering means that you look at the entire system. You look at Highway 1, you look at SoCal, you look at Metro. And this corridor as a bike path is what you could call micro transportation, right? You enable people to find alternatives to a motorized vehicle.
Yeah, that would make so much sense. What I really want to see is just something happen on this rail corridor. I mean, it has sat there for 12 years and nothing being done with it. And we've got to get moving in many respects, don't we? What do you think people can do to become more involved in this process as where it stands with the RTC now?
Well, first of all, they can go to our trailnow.org website and register to our newsletter. They're more than welcome to send me an email at brian@trailnow.org. There's another phenomenal organization called Greenway that is actively working with us in partnership. And be involved in the sense of going to the RTC's website and find out about the meeting. The next meeting coming up, I believe, is August 7th. I don't know what the agenda is, but that would be how people could get really involved.
You've been attending those meetings regularly for a long time. What is your sense about that group? Do they really listen? And what is the best way to effectively address them?
So there's two sets of people when we talk about the RTC. You talk about the commissioners, which are elected officials made up of supervisors, city officials, council, basically voted in. People voted in. The other group is staff, and staff really does follow the guidance from the RTC commissioners. And so people can, I do think we are getting through, and I'm hopeful that we are getting the message. And it's hard for them to argue that a $4.2 billion train is a viable solution. But you're absolutely right. They've only built less than 2 miles of trail in a decade, and it costs $25 million per mile to build that trail. That's twice as much as widening Highway 1. And what's really frustrating with that is we could have used so much of that money for other services for our community. I mean, it should only cost maybe $2 to $3 million per mile.
Yeah.
So that's our struggle, is that we are hopeful that the elected officials begin to make better sense on our tax dollars and open up the trail.
Yeah, thank you. And why is it so expensive? What makes it so expensive?
Well, it really comes down to is they're trying to build the trail next to the tracks, and the corridor is, basically it's 100 years old. The trestles are old, and trying to reconstruct essentially the structural integrity of the underbed of this corridor, essentially what they're doing. That's what really, think about it. You got 22 trestles, maybe 28 trestles, and you have to build a trestle next to them rather than using these trestles. And guess what? The report came out and said none of those trestles can be used for a future train. They can't even be used for freight. So why wouldn't our community begin using those now?
Wow. Brian, I want to thank you. Can I invite listeners to call in if they have questions for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Let them ask questions.
Thank you. Good people listening out there, please join our conversation here today. I'm talking with Brian Peoples from Trail Now. We're talking about the conundrum that our county has been in for quite a long time with the Santa Cruz Rail branch line, the 32-mile long rail corridor from Watsonville to Davenport, and what can be done with it. Please join our conversation if you have thoughts, and join Brian Peoples here today. The number to call is 831-265-5050. Again, 265-5050. Brian, I've been through many of these public meetings that the RTC has held with all the different phases of their studies. What do you think that it could be possible to have not a train per se, but maybe a PRT or a bus adapted to run on the rail, something lighter weight and less obtrusive than a train? What do you think of that idea? Would that work in conjunction with a trail adjacent?
I think that's a good question. And what I will typically say is that first off is rubber wheel transit is the solution, right? It allows for flexibility. And but the short answer is I believe that once the trail is built, it will be so busy that you won't find a place really to have a transit vehicle. And let me give you an example of that. Down in Los Angeles area, they have trails, and they're so busy, they have a street light that turns red that people have to get off their bike and walk it. And I guarantee when the Capitola trestle is converted into a trail, there will be a street light that people will have to get off their bike and walk on it and walk their bikes. Now, having said that, there may be sections that allow for some sort of metro transit system to go along with it. Maybe, one of those wireless ones. Who knows? But the first thing is we need the rail bank and begin using it as using that corridor.
I'm aware that you had a great idea, rail banking, in terms of how to do that, ripping up the trail, ripping up the rail and the beams and all of that. Rail soils under rail corridors are known to be some very contaminated soils. Is there some way that the rail could be banked without going through that expense and contamination exposure? You had some plan that you just put a covering over the rails. Do you want to talk with us about that?
Sure. So first of all, the rails and ties are valuable. So we're not reinventing this process, right? Thousands of miles have been converted to trails, right? And the rails and ties, we got an estimate years ago that the recycle value of the rails and ties was $5 million. And now with the Trump tariff, heck, that might be 7 to 8 million. I don't know, right? So, but to answer your question specifically, I actually started my career 35 years ago as an environmental engineer. My brother owns an environmental firm, and local firm, and we absolutely know the process. And what you do is you encapsulate the contaminants. So the contaminants associated with rails is creosote and heavy metals. And the way you do it is you encapsulate, just like you said, is you encapsulate it. So the sooner we do that, the safer our community is.
And especially when you think about all of the riparian areas that the rail corridor crosses, that would seem a good thing to do regardless of what happens, really. What about...
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Well, you're absolutely right. And what people don't realize is, you asked about why is it so expensive to build a track next to it. There's a lot of riparian issues, a lot of water diversion issues associated with that.
Yeah. What about, someone told me yesterday, in fact, about something they had seen on Nextdoor by a fellow named Keith Bontrager. Are you familiar with him? Keith Bontrager? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. What did you...
Okay.
Is that a name of a person?
Yes, a fellow named Keith Bontrager. Apparently, he is a legendary bicycle frame manufacturer.
Yes, I know Keith.
And he wrote something on Nextdoor saying he had ridden on the trail, portions of the trail that have been constructed up on the west side, and he thinks it's actually safer to ride on the streets because on the trails, crossing the streets, people don't know how to regard you. What do you have to say about that?
He's absolutely right. And here's what we need to do. Like I said, the trail is going to have 2,000 people an hour using it. The volume of people going on those trails is actually going to create more local traffic in the way of surface streets. And so what we should have been doing was designing over and underpasses for the trail to go underneath those roads. That's what I think.
And in fact, that's kind of what there's one section of, I've looked at the RTC's plan for the train. At Cabrillo College, they actually are looking at that as a way for Cabrillo College students to get to a proposed train station is under Highway 1 or an overpass like what they built the Whale overpass, and they're getting ready to build another at Mar Vista. But I don't know. Brian, we have a caller. Would you like to accept a caller?
Yes.
Okay, it looks like it's Cami Corvin. Thank you. Let's bring her into the conversation. Hello? Can you hear us?
Hi, Becky. How are you? It's Cami.
Hi, Cami. Thank you for joining us. We're here with Brian Peoples, and thank you for joining the conversation here about the
Hi,
rail
Brian.
trail.
How are you? Yeah.
And what are your thoughts, Cami?
Well, I have lots of thoughts. First of all, hi, Brian. Thanks for all your hard work. I know you've been pretty diligent about all your hard work and stuff, and so I'm sure lots of people appreciate that. So just wanted to recognize that. Yeah, so thoughts on, you want to ask me a specific question, because I'm telling you, there's so many thoughts, as Brian knows, that goes through this whole planning stages.
Well, you and I have talked a little bit about this issue, and
Right.
why don't you address? You have an excellent guest commentary in today's Santa Cruz Sentinel about the issue of trying to fit the rail and trail along the corridor, and how that's going to negatively impact people who whose properties the RTC say encroach, but most pointedly, your great article today says that it is sort of taking aim at selectively at the senior citizens in the Castle Estates and Blue and Gold mobile home. Do you want to talk with us
Correct.
about that?
Yeah, and so I think as Brian and the RTC has pointed out, and I've had a couple of different articles that have kind of gone back a little bit of today's article in that, and thank you for that, by the way, Becky. But we're talking about, for us, as Brian knows, for us, there's two different issues, right? There's the rail trail issue. So do we want the rail? Do we want the trail? Do we want both? And then we have the encroachment issues, which are a totally separate issue. Buying everybody else's issues and problems that they're having, right? So the problem with the rail trail is that from the last concept report, it appears that for the most part, it sounds to me like the train's dead. And I'm just saying this. Look, I'm not really a big proponent of the trail or the train. We just kind of want to be left alone. So whatever that looks like for people, whether it's going to be the train, the trail, the RTC has promised this whole time that this was going to be the rail trail, right? And my point to this whole thing is that they have known for a long time that there was going to be issues in the corridor, and that they were not going to be able to do a rail and a trail, right, alongside each other, as they promised the citizens here, or most of them that I know of anyway. And they've not said anything about this. They knew about this in 2012 when they bought the property. So, we fast forward 13 years later or 12 years later to our area, and it appears that the encroachment issues that are being talked about behind Castle Mobile Estates and Capitola and Blue and Gold are a certain percentage or a certain width. If you go up about half a block or a block to 41st Avenue, you have what's called the Capitola Beach Villas there, and their condominiums. And apparently they are also encroaching, and this is based off the survey that was done, the boundary survey from RTC in 2023. So the question then arises, and came to point from somebody that I can't mention right now, but at hopefully some point we'll be able to bring light, and this will affirm things. But we're looking at that the 41st Avenue area where the Capitola Beach Villas are actually less width than the Capitola Castle Mobile Estates part, right? The corridor right there. About a foot and a half. So apparently the thing is, RTC is going to make it less narrow, or able to all of a sudden make it less narrow in that area at the Capitola Beach Villas. However, and not asking these people to bother with encroachments. In fact, I don't even think they've even been given notices. That's going to be our next Public Request Acts request, and they've not been given notices that I know of. And if somebody else knows differently, please feel free to let me in on that. But they are going to do the encroachments behind Castle Mobile Estates. So my question becomes, if in fact you're able to do something where you're able to plan the rail trail, quote unquote, in a less narrow area, why can't you do the same thing in an area that has more width? So why would you have to do the encroachments then? It becomes the question. And then it becomes, are you targeting senior citizens and low income housing versus, condominiums that are a little bit more affluent? They're not rich people by any means. They're not, Depot Hill and $1 million houses. Well, they might be $1 million, but so that becomes a question. And then that tells me that the RTC is not looking at this whole situation in a fair and timely manner, right? So if you're going to do something, you need to do it. And let's be clear about this. I worked for federal courts with 6 federal judges. There were many times that I had cases that I did not like that person whatsoever, but I had to base decisions on facts, evidence, and the law, right? And this is what we're expecting from RTC, is that you will base your decisions on facts, evidence, and what is right. And they apparently are not doing that. They're being selective. And that brings me back to what I feel is a discrimination against lower income and senior citizens, and possible elder abuse, right? You're putting them through a lot of stuff that's going on here.
It's very stressful. Yeah.
Yeah. You betcha.
Hey, Brian, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, if it's a trail only, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm in full agreement with Cam. Thank you for your work, first of all. And I think that it's absolutely wrong that the RTC is taking actions against us locals, right? At the end of the day, that's what they're doing. They're suing, and you ask why it's taking so long to build the trail? Because they're suing all the neighbors. And worse yet, us local taxpayers are paying for those legal challenges, and that's why it's delayed so much. And then what's even worse, if we did the federal rail banking process, the federal government would pay for all of the legal issues. They would pay for the transactions between the two parties. Wow. That's what's frustrating. That is what's frustrating.
Wow, that is a new information for me. If we rail banked the corridor, the federal government would pay for everything, or just the legal?
Yeah, they pay for the legal. They pay for the property. Like if it's an easement, right? If it's an easement, the federal government funding. That's what the federal rail banking process is all about. And that's what's really frustrating. Us local taxpayers are paying attorneys to sue these low-income residents. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that does not seem fair at all.
Well, I mean, again, you're talking about something here across the board, right? So Brian's making a good point of there are taxpayers that are paying the RTC's, legal fees and things like this and yada, 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 and then we have to pay our own fees, right? And then you look at, you're talking about taking away a home from a senior citizen that's worked hard. And look, let's be really clear and honest about this. We live very modestly, right? We live in mobile homes. I drive a 2007 minivan, right? My mobile home is a 1971, albeit I did a little bit of remodeling and upgrading to make sure it wouldn't burn down in the middle of the night or whatever the situation is. But this is my choice to live in here. And it was my choice because I could afford to be here, as my family's been here over 100 years. I'm in Social Security age right now that I can't afford to go out and buy $1 million plus, home, which we know right now is about the average price of, $800,000-$900,000 is the average price of a home, right? The normal person living in Santa Cruz can't afford this, right? We're talking about your longtime locals, the people that are working in your restaurants and all these, they can't afford this. So what did they come up with? Oh, we're going to build low-income housing. That's great. Let's build the low-income housing. Let's get those people housed. But we're going to take it away. So that doesn't make sense to me when you're talking about doing something like that. So to Brian's point, it would be very frustrating for me if I was on the other side of the coin, sitting and say my tax dollars are going to go for this. But why is RTC doing this? Why do they have to do this? And the answer is they don't have to do this. They really don't. If you don't have to do it at 41st, you don't have to do it here. You definitely don't have to do it here. Because you got more room here, buddy, than you do at 41st.
Yeah, I've always wondered why the trail that has been built up on the west side has to be so wide. Brian, you're telling me that that's to accommodate very high population numbers of riders there, but it seems like there has to be some wiggle room to accommodate squeeze areas, but that's not possible if you've also got to have the train there. And Brian, do you want to talk about that? How flexible is this width of a trail?
Well, if you pull the tracks out, you've got plenty of room. And at the end of the day, the best way is to have an asphalt trail that is about 12 feet wide. And then you have dirt trail that people can walk and run on as well. It doesn't have to be a 27-foot wide asphalt trail. You want actually the dirt to allow people to do that. But at the end of the day, the people are arguing that we have to keep the old tracks. Well, we already know the tracks can't be used for anything. And it's like, that's like gold. It's like $5 million, $7 million in recycle value. And it's contaminating our environment. We should be working hard to mitigate that. So that's our goal, is to move fast.
Well, I think the point, Brian, on that too is that, and to Becky's question is, if you can put a rail trail at a less width at 41st Avenue, then you could put it on the rest of quarter, and we don't have to deal with all these encroachments. We don't have to deal with Betty's Burgers. We don't have to deal with Caroline's going out of business because, RTC has come in and sued Bayview Hotel and that property right there. By the way, Caroline's gives, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in a nonprofit status to local, agencies here in government, or not government, but local groups here that are in need of help. And that's what they do. So you're taking away from that, right? So sorry, we're going to close you down, nonprofit, because you do this and this and this for our community. Sorry, senior citizens, we're going to do this and this and this because we're going to do this because you're not helping our community, right? So I agree with Brian that you don't have to do a lot of this stuff, and especially right now, if the train, quote unquote, is dead, as everybody's saying, from the $4.23 billion price tag that it has, is this something that we really need to deal with right now? And how can we mediate this, and what is best, like you just said, for the environment? Look, I'm not happy about having 2,000 people an hour coming by my house in the back, right? But I also know that it's environmentally better for the community, that people want it and they like it. I mean, shoot, I trip barefoot and sober, so I'm probably not going to be the one, on that track, right? But there's going to be a lot.
Cami, let me make sure I'm clear on that 2,000. So when we talk about 2,000, it's not like a single highway lane that it's one point where they cross over that point every 2,000 an hour. It's the entire span, right?
Okay.
It's that. Let's make sure we're clear of that. And but that adds a lot of value, right? You open up this transportation resource. So don't worry, there's not going to be 2,000 people an hour, except for like maybe in a big running event or something.
Right. Well, I feel better now, Brian.
Brian, I know that you are very good about doing your homework. What areas of the trail would be the most busiest, the most congested for those who are listening and live along the corridor? Where do you think it would be the busiest, heaviest used?
Well, that's pretty simple. We know that from Aptos to Santa Cruz will be very busy, and there's going to be real peak areas like Capitola Trestle, Aptos Trestle, honestly, and Seabright. Oh my gosh, Seabright, the corner of Seabright and the trail is going to be really bad. And that's where we've been arguing they should be designing an over or underpass in those major sections. 7th Avenue is going to be a terrible. It's going to actually be bad for surface traffic. And that's where our frustration is. They're spending $10 million for a train study that is not going to happen. They could have spent that money on designing a world-class trail that would have been safe, that would have not caused more local surface traffic. I mean, I feel bad about how bad, I'm embarrassed by our community, that Santa Cruz, we're supposed to be progressive, but we're, over.
I think, to your point on that, Brian, is that the other thing is, like, I keep thinking about this $4.23 billion price tag and this $36 to $41 million annual budget, operating costs. And I keep thinking to myself, what could the community do with $41 million a year, right? And there is so much that can be done. There's housing, there's, we could buy more buses that are clean air buses and give people, 10 to 15 minute intervals for bus rides. You could even afford to have organizations pay for, the lower income people to utilize the buses. We could open up a little bit more. My mother used to always say back in the 80s, they're not going to widen Highway 1. They're not going to do it because they don't want the people coming, right? Well, guess what? They're here. So we have to look at that, right? But what's the best way to do that? And I just feel like this train to nowhere, or this train that they're expecting is going to pay for itself, when in fact it's been proven, studies over and over with even larger populations, that it's not going to do that. And if Santa Cruz wanted to get on this bandwagon, they should have done this back in the 70s and the 80s. And they did not. And they waited and they waited and they waited. And now the costs are too high. And by the time that they actually get a train in, it's going to be antiquated. And we're probably going to be flying or doing whatever it is that's going to be happening there,
Joby Aviation will be in our skies, huh?
Be buying some of their stock here pretty soon. But, yeah, I mean, I just, to Brian's point, there's so much more that can be done, this money, not just the trail, but in our community alone. These people are struggling to live here.
Yeah.
And this is our hometown, and we should not be feeling like we're being forced out of our own town to have to go live someplace else.
Yeah.
Like, I want to die. Right? That's why I bought a mobile home.
Yeah.
I can afford it. I live here, and I'm going to die here.
Yeah.
That was my goal.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you both about, I know that the Santa Cruz branch rail line is included in the California State Rail Plan, and it is actually intended to be funded in the state's plan in the next few years. So where will this all end up? What do you think? Will the state dump bunches of money into Santa Cruz County to make a train happen and continue this conundrum of trying to fit both within a narrow corridor in areas? Or do you think the state will dump money to rail bank and promote a trail only? What are your thoughts, Brian?
Well, first of all, no. The short answer is we know that our train is not competitive. Just because you're on the rail plan doesn't mean you're going to get the money. You're competing against other communities that are looking for intercity rail and bus services. So first of all, and then think about it. Our rail is an offshoot of the main line, right? It's like a dead end. So it's like if you were going to build out a community road system, why would you go spend all these millions of dollars for this dead end street when you still need to build the main corridor? So you're never ever going to get state money for that rail.
But you're aware that the state has funded the Pajaro passenger rail station?
They've given $500,000 to study to study it. And there's a lot of studies. I mean, how many studies have we done on a train for 30 years, $30 million? We don't need more studies.
There's an article, there's a letter to the editor today, and this is a very good newspaper issue today, the Santa Cruz Sentinel. There's a letter that says essential county services at risk with train spending. And this writer, Mr. Will Mayall in Live Oak, says the study alone has already cost $9 million. So think of all that money, I know, in endless studies. But the state is even more, I don't know. The way the state spends money is even crazier sometimes. So what do you think if people want a trail only, what is the best way to advocate their interest in that outcome with the state legislators to push for that?
Well, I think it's actually the California Transportation Commission is the organization that really allocates the money. And so they could go and look up that organization to see where that money is going. But you're right; they should be advocating for trails, and really, at the end of the day, I think we all agree that the train is dead, and our goal is just to get our local officials to support the federal rail banking process.
Mm-hmm. Cami, what are your thoughts?
Well, I know Will. He's a nice guy. He writes quite well, and he's got a lot of good ideas. A lot of people feel like the Greenway is responsible for all this, like it's some kind of big cult conspiracy thing. You know what? So support people, right? So, I mean, you got both sides going here, right? And so here's the thing. You can't fit a square peg into a round hole, right? And that's what they're trying to do. It's not like you have all of this open space where you have it more up north. You have a lot of open space up there, and it wasn't that big of a deal, I don't think, to try and get a rail trail together up there. And, isn't it beautiful? It's a great ride along the coast and yada, yada, yada. That's all great. But now you're talking about coming into the city, right? You're talking about a denser population. You're talking about a closer knit thing. You're talking about neighborhoods that have been around. For instance, the mobile home park has been here since 1970, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's not just it's been around a long time, and we're not the only ones that have been around a long time. And by the way, if you want it, when you're comparing the Capitola Beach villas, I believe that those were built in like the 80s or 90s, or I'm sorry, the 90s or 2000s. I think they're not that old. But my point being is that these things have been put in place. They've been approved throughout the county, not just here. And you're trying to make something happen that you cannot do within the city limits because of the constraints. And again, I go back to my original thought of, one of my articles is that RTC knew this when they bought the property, right? In 2012, they knew this. Mm-hmm. They knew the encroachment issues. In the first meeting that we had with these guys, when they sent us a letter, I asked them specifically, I've been in the law field a long time, so I'm pretty smart when it comes to asking specific questions to get people to basically, tell on themselves.
Provide clear information.
That I want. And they were like, yeah, well, I said, did you not do this boundary survey? Well, no, we didn't do it. Well, why not? Well, because we didn't have the funds at the time, but we knew that there was some encroachment issues, quote unquote.
Wow.
So you're telling me that you knew at the time that you bought the property that there was encroachment issues, but you waited 11 friggin' years to do a boundary survey? Mm-hmm. Who does that? Who spends millions and millions?
Let me comment on Cam's comment about the North Coast. So, and we worked with the local farmers up there to build the trail there, and the RTC kept fighting us, saying that we couldn't pull the tracks up. And what the results is a major environmental impact. They only got a temporary permit from the Coastal Commission to build the trail, to be honest. Mm-hmm. They've had to come back and do environmental mitigation because they're damaging the environment up there. When they could have built the trail on the tracks, that's why it's been delayed for 10 years. And that's why it's over budget. It's millions over budget. Fortunately, it's a federal project, so they've been paying for it. Mm-hmm. But that's a great example of the RTC with blinders on, saying we're going down this railroad plan no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We don't care what you think. This is what we're going to do, whether you like it or not.
But I'm sorry, Cami, go ahead.
No, I was just, to Brian's point, is exactly that. And
Yeah.
now they're finding that, now the public is becoming aware. And I'll tell you why, because of people like Brian, people like, that are doing these public request acts.
Yeah.
Like, your listeners, you don't have to believe us. Go do your own public request act. Go start asking for crap and start seeing where it's actually there. And you will start seeing these things, and then you will understand.
Let me give you an example of that Public Request Act. When the Capitola trestle was being, the big debate was they wanted to divert the trail onto Park Avenue. And the Capitola citizen group did great work, got public service requests, and found that the county staff and RTC staff were lying to the city council about the deadline that they had to submit the paperwork to the CTC. They basically told them and said, you need to vote right now. We need you to decide right now. And what happened is we've got the information from them. And it was really interesting because the meeting that the public officials had, this secret meeting, was like on a Teams meeting. So all their conversations got recorded. And in the recording, the county staff said, let's keep this close to our chest. They basically went and said, let's keep this close to our chest. Let's not tell the city council that we have the ability to do an extension. But no, they were pressuring them, said you had to vote right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's not the only thing, Becky. We did a public request act that was given to me regarding behind here of a Zoom call back in December of 2024, when in fact the RTC was talking with Rod Tidmore from the county planning department, and they were talking about, possibly doing eminent domain with us.
Mm-hmm.
And Grace Blakely basically said, quote, I'm paraphrasing, but we have to be very careful how we proceed with this because it could be basically political suicide, right? So, the community will not like that. So there's a lot of backdoor negotiations. There's a lot of backdoor conversations that are going on with plans that are not being, said to the public. And again, as to Brian's point, they lie.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say this about a public agency because I work for so many of them, and I would like to believe, and maybe foolishly, that you guys are being on the up and up and you're doing what is right for our community, and they are not. They are not your friend. They are not doing what is right for the community. And people need to stand up for that. They need to ask for transparency and accountability for these guys. And again, if you don't believe us, you don't have to. You get your own public request act. It is not a difficult thing to do. Mm-hmm. You go ask for it and you read the stuff, and then you make your own decision based on that.
Mm-hmm. Very well put. What I think has surprised many residents up on the west side is that the proposed passenger rail would not go on the west side and up to Davenport. It would stop at either the boardwalk or natural bridges. And that makes no sense to me, because a passenger rail going up there would serve not only the west side community, but also UCSC. So why would you not do that?
I'll explain it.
Please, Brian, go ahead.
Too close to the tracks to accommodate a passenger. Track requirements for passenger train is 12 feet, but they designed the trail next to the tracks at 8.5 feet. In addition to that is the section after Depot Station. Basically, it goes down the middle of a road, down the middle of a street.
Oh.
So those are primary reasons. But think about that. These guys said they're going to have a train and trail. They went and designed the trail that doesn't even meet the requirements of their train. Is that smart engineering?
Right.
Thank you for explaining that, because I asked this same question up at the last RTC open house, and they said, "Oh, write that down on a card, and we'll get back to you." And I have yet to hear back from them. So thank you for explaining that.
Well, the meetings that they have a year and a half ago, when we had the open town hall meeting, I specifically asked questions regarding the section past 41st Avenue, right? And they were saying, no, it's going to be train only. there's not going to be a trail there because
Right.
it's not wide enough.
Mhm.
And I said, oh, that's interesting. Now, apparently, it's wide enough that they can do both, right?
Mhm.
So, again, they're going to just make it less wide. And then my point to that is, like, how safe is that going to be? I mean, Brian can attest to that more so than I can because I don't ride bikes and I don't walk on those trails. But, you know, that to have a less wide trail and you're going to have somebody there with their dogs and you're going to have e-bikes running and somebody, you know, I mean, like I told you, I trip barefoot and sober. Someone's going to run me over. So I just kind of feel like that's going to be a liability waiting to happen for whatever agencies happen to be in that area.
Mhm. I want to thank you both for joining us here today. Time this hour has flown. We're down to about 5 minutes or less on our program. Brian, let's see. How shall we finish this time? An idea came to me as I was listening to you two, and I keep thinking about what I see on Highway 1.
Go ahead, ask me that again.
Coming for all those people from Watsonville. Why couldn't we have a train or something like that would bring commuters from Watsonville to, say, Aptos or someplace, and then have them get on the bus from there? There has to be a way, because I just don't think that people in Watsonville are going to ride their bikes on a trail to get to their work at Dominican or whatever.
So let me explain. So, Becky, you know that the California state measures transportation planning via vehicle miles traveled,
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's actually not a good metric. They should be measuring it people miles traveled,
Yeah.
right? And when you look at it from people's miles traveled, then you look at the corridor. So think about how a corridor, a highway corridor, how do you increase the capacity of a highway corridor? Well, you make it wide, you densify the cars, you know, carpooling, buses, and then autonomous cars reduces the bubble between the cars. Go ahead. And then now let's pretend like you got a train corridor. Okay, so how do you operate a corridor? Well, you take a container, you fill the people in it like water, and you shoot the container down the corridor. And unused 99% of that's the problem with people think that a train is efficient. It's really not short distances because the corridor is the transportation corridor sits unused 99% of the time. It's not.
You're cutting in and out, Brian.
Conception.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. You know, we've got 1 minute left. So I want to make sure that you have time, Brian, to tell us how to find out more about Trail Now, get involved. And Cami, I want to thank you for joining the conversation today.
You bet. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, so it's Brian at Trail Now, and trailnow.org is our organization. People could follow us on Facebook, and, you know, start paying attention to the news and going to the RTC meetings. That's our advice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Becky, for the time.
You are so welcome, and thank you for your good work, your persistence. And the regional transportation hearings are usually the first Thursday of every month, but I think the next one is in August. Is that correct, Brian?
Yes, next one's August.
Okay.
July.
All right. Well, thank you very much,
Thanks.
Brian Peoples from Trail Now. Thank you so much. Brian, thank you. We are off the air now. And Cami, thank you. We're off the air. Hello, welcome back to Community Matters. I'm honored to be your host. My name is Becky Steinbrunner, and we have one more hour for our discussion about community matters. I want to thank the two previous guests, Mr. Brian Peoples from Trail Now and Cami Corvin called in. She has been very active in a group within the Castle Mobile Home Estates in Capitola and working partners with those who are in the Blue and Gold Mobile Home Park on the other side of the tracks from this area where the Regional Transportation Commission is insisting that people move their mobile homes out of the encroachment area they claim at their own expense, and have given them the deadline of June 30th, that's Monday, to get it done or respond. So imagine the stress that has imposed upon these elderly fixed income people. The price tag, according to the study that the RTC has done, is anywhere from $7,000 to tens of thousands of dollars to make that happen. So I want to thank those two good folks for their work. I would just like to take a moment. We've got our second hour guest calling in here in a minute, Mr. Brian Roeder from Never Again Moss Landing. I'd like to take a moment to first acknowledge a couple of really good things happening in our community. This weekend is what is known as Field Day for all amateur radio operators across America to get their equipment out and operate their radios without the use of AC power. And this is to prepare for emergencies and providing emergency communication for their communities at times of need. Santa Cruz County is quite an active place in amateur radio. There are over 2,000 licensed amateur radio operators. This year, that group will be teaming up with the San Lorenzo Valley Amateur Radio Operator Group, and they're hosting their field day in the big open field that you will see next to State Park Drive and Highway 1. They've got their tents up and their antennas up, and they are going to be having great opportunities for the public to come in and look and learn about amateur radio this weekend. This happens nationwide the fourth weekend of June every year and has happened for over 100 years. So take advantage of that. You can go see them if you turn in as if you're going to go to the Seacliff Inn, Best Western Hotel, Old Dominion Court Lane, and follow the road out there to where you see the antennas and tents, and ask about ham radio. That's Amateur Radio Field Day happening this weekend, Saturday. Saturday is the main operating event. Another good thing happening in our community is tomorrow from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Wildfire Resiliency Fair in Corralitos. That will be at the Corralitos Community Center, 35 Browns Valley Road in Corralitos. There will be stations and speakers there from CAL FIRE, FireWise, which is when people get together in a community and work to reduce their fire risks and get insurance policy reductions for doing so. For those who are interested in learning more about getting and keeping fire insurance, United policyholders will also be there, as also will be the community emergency response teams, helping people be better prepared for emergencies, and the Santa Cruz County Resource Conservation District that offers free chipping service every spring and fall for people to be able to clear defensible space around their homes and properties and to dispose of it in a good way, not just dumping it down the ravine for free. And I would like to now open the line here with Mr. Brian Roeder from Never Again Moss Landing. Hello, Brian. Are you there?
I am, Becky. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you. Thank you so much for calling in. For those of you who are just tuning in, I'm connecting now via phone with Mr. Brian Roeder from Never Again Moss Landing. It is hard for me to believe, but I do continue to hear it, that some people were not aware of the horrific fire that happened at the Moss Landing Vistra Battery Energy Storage System BESS facility, January 16th, that burned for a number of days and then reignited in February. So the Never Again Moss Landing group is the citizens. It's a completely wonderful grassroots group that has formed to get information, first of all, and take other action. So, Brian Roeder, please introduce yourself and give us an update, if you will, please, on the Never Again Moss Landing group.
Sure, Becky. I just also want to thank you for all that you've done to bring this to the public's attention. The fire happened when there were the fires in LA, 4 days before the change of administration, all the chaos that's ensued, planes going down. So it's kind of a huge story that just didn't get picked up in many ways, although there's been a huge amount of coverage, actually, both locally and nationally. But in all the noise, it's just something that got drowned out. And unfortunately, locally, for a variety of reasons, the storyline fairly quickly shifted to the idea that there's really nothing to see here, that nothing terrible happened. The fire broke out on Thursday the 16th. It's a day that changed my family's lives.
Yeah.
We've had to move and abandon our home. My wife has been sick ever since.
Many people have. Let me just say that.
Yes,
many people have.
Hundreds of people. Hundreds.
Yeah.
And there are probably thousands of more that have been exposed to chemicals that are going to impact their health as they move into the future, and they don't even know it. It's a tragic situation, and it's really misunderstood. One of the big developments that's happened over the last month since the last time you and I spoke on this show is that the environmental justice community is starting to take note and get involved in assisting us with getting some traction on this. Soon after, within a month after the fire broke out, it was very clear that state authorities were not engaging in this issue. And there are, I think, some very not valid, I think there's some reasons for that. I don't think they're valid, but I understand why they're there. The state's very committed to decarbonizing by 2045. I support that initiative. Most of the members of our group do. As you said, we're all citizens. Mostly people live out in the affected area. And the idea of decarbonizing makes a lot of sense. The problem is that at the heart of that current strategy is a very, very volatile and toxic and dangerous component, which are the batteries. They're very volatile, and they store a great deal of energy. They're fairly inexpensive as a tool for storing energy compared to some of the other solutions out there, but they're dangerous. And when this battery fire broke out, I've been saying 100,000 batteries burned. I'm wrong about that. There were 100,000 battery racks involved. There were over 4.5 million battery cells that burned. And all it takes is one cell overheating because of fissuring that can lead to a fire in one cell. And the way that facility was configured, it led to them all burning up effectively. So I've been saying that the cavalry's not coming. But the good news is that through these environmental justice groups and individuals, to some degree, the cavalry is starting to come. Let me give you an example. There's an organization called GreenAction. And I didn't even know about the environmental justice field until this all happened. But they've reached out to us, and their kind of unique niche is that they have access to and work with the regulatory agencies in Sacramento. For example, there's the California Department of Toxic Substance Control, California EPA, and the federal EPA. All of them are going to be playing a role here in the cleanup. We've learned recently that federal EPA is going to be very involved in cleaning up within what they call inside the fence. They'll be involved in oversight of how the remaining pile of refuse, which has not been touched, by the way, it's still there.
Yeah.
The building is still there because the building's damaged. They can't touch this stuff yet. And there's a lot of really nasty stuff in that pile, that huge pile that's got to be removed and dealt with. There's water on site. There are a lot of tanks that have been put up. There are requirements that all of these, that the water and the site and the soils all be addressed in a way that doesn't create additional problems. And the EPA is the oversight agency for that.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the County of Monterey is the agency responsible, will provide the overall response for outside the fence, working with California State. And so GreenAction has helped us finally and for the first time initiate dialogue with someone from the EPA who's involved in getting together the way that the EPA will communicate with our community as they move forward with their planning and implementation of the remediation of the site within the fence. And then even more importantly, I believe, is that we have now met just in the last 2 days. A group of us from Nevergan Moss Landing have met with the one of the deputy directors for the Department of Toxic Substance Control. Her name is Mandy Bain, and she's the Hazardous Waste Management Program's deputy for DTSC. DTSC is a very important organization, agency at the state that is going to be very involved and has been very involved in the remediation and addressing what came out of this fire. So we met with them yesterday, and GreenAction facilitated this. They know how to reach out to these folks. They know these folks. They're one of the environmental justice organizations that is starting to come to us and help us. And through their good offices, we were able to sit down for the first time and have a dialogue with these folks. Now, I can say that Mandy and her two colleagues who are there are very genuine people. They come out of the scientific background, but also worked in other situations involving industrial accidents, and this is an enormous industrial accident. Let there be no confusion about this. This clean technology is and what was at Moss Landing was the largest battery storage facility in the world when it burned. There are others that are larger that are on the planning board and that are being permitted as we speak throughout California and elsewhere, but this was the largest to date. And so DTSC, the folks that we met with, who, by the way, came in from Sacramento and Los Angeles to meet with us, they came and they listened to us. They listened to what's happened to this community. They listened to us in regards to the hundreds of people who have gotten sick, seriously sick, our concerns and the data that we've collected regarding the possibility of long-term illness. The EPA initially, you probably called, Becky, on the Monday after the fire broke out, a young woman, I'm 62 now, yesterday I was her age, but a woman who appeared to be in her late 20s, early 30s, stood up during the initial press conference and said that everything that had been inside the plant, that the HF gas, the exploding gas, had been destroyed. And that original statement has never been corrected, and that in fact was not the case. This gas, which is very dangerous, actually went up into the sky because it's lighter than air, and it hit the marine layer, and at that point, some of it was converted into hydrofluoric acid and hydrochloric acid, which are very caustic, and which rained down over a very large area and caused significant skin burns for a lot of people. And breathing issues, really serious breathing issues for a lot of people, such as my wife and myself. So that statement's never been corrected. And we let the folks from DTSC, which works with EPA, know that that had happened. But moreover, we have data from the EPA that was collected since that shows that, in fact, there was emissions of that gas, but they never corrected their statement. So it takes organizations like GreenAction and others like them that are now starting to work with our organization to be able to reach out and start to clarify for these organizations what's happened. Something else real quick that's important is that we helped DTSC to recognize something that they didn't realize. You know, when these disasters happen, what I've learned is that there are standard protocols for how to deal with them. But this is an unprecedented disaster because nothing like this has ever happened.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happened that they weren't prepared for is that when you have batteries that catch on fire, it's something called thermal runaway. It's a condition in which this fire burns incredibly hot and in which it actually makes its own oxygen so you can't put it out.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's happening, it's destroying what's inside of these batteries. And because the fire at Moss Landing was so huge, the temperatures that were generated were in the multi-thousand degree range, you know, up to 5,000 degrees. Now at those temperatures, metal, which we found, deposited all over the area through our wipe initiative that we did a week after the fire.
And also in Dr. Aiello's, Ivan Aiello's Moss Landing Marine
Yes.
Lab studies, he found that too.
Yes. And what we have learned is that those metals were vaporized, literally turned into a mist. And the problem with that is that EPA was testing, and they've stated repeatedly that they tested and did not find abnormal levels of anything particulate matter in the air greater than 2.5 micromillimeters, I think is the measurement. And the problem is that because these toxic materials, the metals and other components, various dioxins, PVCs, PFAS, etc., that were there and present in the building and in the batteries, were vaporized, they were smaller than 2.5 micromilligrams. And what that means is that they were measuring for something that was too small, that was smaller than what they were measuring for.
Yeah.
And the DTSC had not considered that possibility.
Wow.
The information they have had from their measurements is that, you know, this stuff wasn't there because they didn't pick it up, but they weren't measuring for the size of what came out of this fire.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, the conversation allowed them to look at the possibility that what they assumed was the case, which is this stuff didn't come out or was destroyed, but which our wipes show was deposited widely in very high levels.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the reason why their data doesn't match ours is because they weren't measuring for what was actually happening.
Yes.
Just as their ground monitoring of hexafluorine gas didn't account for the fact that the gas was going straight up in the air. Now, this is the EPA
Yes.
that was doing these measurements, not DTSC. But
Yeah.
at the same time, DTSC and everybody else have been relying upon the EPA's measurements, which we believe don't show what actually happened. It's been extraordinary.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. If for those of you just tuning in, welcome. This is Community Matters. My name is Becky Steinbrunner. I'm honored to be the host here, and I'm speaking with Mr. Brian Roeder from Never Again Moss Landing. So you are talking with these people from the state and federal departments. There was no declaration of an emergency or disaster issued by Monterey County or the governor of California. How is that going to affect funding for the cleanup and the study that has to ensue?
That's a great question, Becky. I don't know. Our greater concern has been how has the state responded in helping the community?
Yeah.
You know, my family we're very lucky we've had the means to be able to move and get out. We're living closer to the ocean on the ocean side rather than here in the Bay Area, where hundreds, thousands have been impacted by not just the initial fire, yes, but a lot of people saw this for for all of February and a good chunk of March. There was this terrible industrial miasma over the bay. I've never seen anything like it. I grew up here. And that was because the battery pile was still hot and smoldering. And it was emitting gases that were continuing to spread throughout the Monterey Bay area. We know this because people who are had health impacts, pre-existing health impacts, immunological issues, pre-existing conditions, they were the ones who were hit the hardest by the fire. And when it rained during the months of February and March, they would all, we would have dozens of entries at our Facebook group saying, I am so sick today. And it was because this stuff was precipitating out of the air when it rained.
Yeah.
So that was there. And, throughout all of this, the point is that the authorities have not helped that community in any way. There are hundreds of people there on fixed incomes, Royal Oaks, Prunedale, people with livestock, people who are veterans. It's an older population in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been no effort to provide them with any financial assistance other than initially through a community not-for-profit organization. There were checks for $750 given to those who stood in line for hours through Vistra. And that's all we've seen for the community from either the company or the state financially. So there are lots of people who've taken on hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in medical bills, who have struggled with their health and have received no assistance. So the state has really been AWOL. You've heard me say it before. Our state senator, John Laird, has been AWOL. We met with him. He said he was going to help. He hasn't. Mm-hmm. And, it's incomprehensible to me that they have not attempted to try and come and understand. And the very first conversation we've had with anybody, from a state agency happened yesterday, 5.5 months into this.
And what are they planning to do? What did they tell you they will do?
Right now, they're trying to learn. I think they're trying, perhaps, if we're lucky, to relearn what it is they thought they knew.
Mm-hmm.
And we're opening a dialogue. We're not sure where it'll lead. I got to be very honest. In my opinion, I can't prove this, but in my opinion, from the governor's office down, there's been a commitment to decarbonization that has precluded the ability and has led to the decision to act like Moss Landing is not a big setback.
Yes.
You saw it in the initial comments from the governor's office as well as from John Laird's office. And the comments were, this is a one-off. They were all packed in a building. They were using the old chemistry. Now they're into containers. They use a new chemistry. But there's a huge but there. The new chemistry also burns.
Yeah.
And those containers also burn and they explode. And when they do, like the ones they're planning to put next to Aptos High, they will mess up that neighborhood where I grew up. They won't take out a region like this thing did, but they'll mess up that neighborhood. And the people who are healthy will breathe the exact same stuff as the people pre-existing. They just won't know how sick they're going to get.
Yeah.
Because they're healthy and it'll happen to them later.
Yeah.
And they won't know why they're sick, but they'll get sick. Not all of them. Some will be pre-inclined, and then the environmental will combine with that to get them. Some won't get sick, but there are definitely going to be people getting sick from these fires, from this fire, no question about it.
Yeah. And that's what baffles me is now, you described the public officials calling what happened in Moss Landing a one-off, and that is precisely what the expert Dr. Mark Jacobson said at the Santa Cruz County Commission on the Environment's workshop that happened Wednesday evening. It was incredible for me to hear that. And anyone interested in listening to that workshop, it was excellent. It happened Wednesday, June 25th. You can find the recording on the website for Santa Cruz County Commission on the Environment. And I really want to applaud that commission for holding these workshops. This was the first in a series of 3 that are going to happen, talking about this issue of battery energy storage. And the takeaway was from the experts was, well, we have to keep rushing because things are so perilous with the global warming, but they don't seem to understand the risks, the unacceptable risks of using lithium battery technology, and are seemingly not willing to examine the alternatives or to slow the pace down so that the alternatives can be allowed to develop that are safe.
Just a moment, it's just in passing. If I break up here, it's just in passing. I'm driving here in Monterey, and there's a bad cell here.
Okay. Thank you for joining us here.
No, it's Brian. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I got a really bad spotter. Do you have somebody else joining you here? Because I am driving, and I think it's better now.
I do.
I
do see another caller here.
Good. Please, I'll be quiet. I would love to hear from someone else.
Okay. Let's bring in Nina Audino here from Santa Cruz, Stop Lithium BESS in Santa Cruz County. Nina, can you hear us?
Yes, and can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you for calling in and joining the conversation here. Brian Roeder is driving and is through a kind of a difficult area. So thank you for joining the conversation. Please, what would you like to say?
Well, I would like to join Brian and kind of continue with what he was talking about. But first, I just wanted to introduce myself again. I know I've spoken on this show a couple of times in the past. I am Nina Audino. My husband, Greg, and I started the local grassroots group, citizen action group called Stop Lithium BESS in Santa Cruz County. We started it in late January, early February, shortly after the massive toxic battery fire at Vistra's Moss Landing BESS 300. And we've been working on this and growing a group since then. I also wanted to thank the Santa Cruz Commission on the Environment, and in particular Chris Domhorst, its chair, for holding these public panel workshops.
Indeed.
I really want to thank him, profoundly, because he is the first person to and it was done on his own initiative. He is the first person to open up a public space and an official public space, a government space, for a public exchange of ideas on this. Mm-hmm. So I am, and my husband and our group, we're very grateful for this opportunity. And I just wanted to confirm and kind of agree with what Brian just said. I and those of us who were there, we listened very carefully to both Professor Jacobson and Dennis O'Neill from 3CE. And so something that profoundly concerned me, and that was consistent in both of their presentations, is unsubstantiated claims, whether statistical or other, and a very strong industry narrative. Even from Jacobson, although his narrative struggled at times, and I wanted to draw attention to that. So Professor Jacobson basically redirected the questions our group posed with concerns about lithium battery technology deployed in storage facilities, energy storage facilities. He redirected our questions pretty consistently back to this statement. It was like a refrain, almost like a memorized refrain. Well, we don't need to worry because we will never have a situation like, the unfortunate fire at Vistra's Moss Landing BESS 300, because that was an anomaly, because it was a mistake.
Yeah.
And in the future, our fires will be rare and they will be small. And so I understand that this is one narrative that can be told, that this fire at Vistra's Moss Landing facility, lithium BESS facility, was an anomaly. I understand that you can tell the narrative that way, but I believe that the more important way to tell this narrative is what Brian just pointed out, that this was an unprecedented event, and not just that, but that it was an unprecedented event of a worst case scenario in this kind of battery energy storage facility, which is something that Glenn Church has been pointing out repeatedly. This is an unacceptably tragic example of a worst-case scenario. And the thing about worst-case scenarios is you cannot make a scientifically grounded statement that you can guarantee that a worst-case scenario won't happen in the future.
Exactly.
Worst-case scenarios are just that. They are worst-case scenarios that can happen. Not that it will happen the way it happened at Moss Landing. No one is claiming that. It's kind of like a narrative that the industry is spinning to take attention off of the real issue.
Yes.
No one's claiming that it's going to happen like that again. I mean, we are moving away from NMC technology. Everyone understands that. That's not the point. The point is that humans cannot scientifically guarantee that another set of circumstances that could lead to a worst case scenario are never going to happen. That's not a scientific statement. So that was something I heard that was very concerning to me. It was disturbing and concerning. Another thing I heard from Professor Jacobson, which kind of stunned me, is when he was asked about whether or not he was familiar with current research underway to create a much more energy-dense sodium-ion battery with a wider application, quickly research that's underway. And I know I asked him about the LENS Consortium, 8 universities and 6 labs, including Sandia and Berkeley Lab and his laboratory in Stanford. I asked him whether he was familiar with these colleagues and the work that they were doing, and he was asked that question again by our group in another question, and he ended up saying, "I don't know about this research."
Yes.
And then when Dennis from 3CE was speaking, he actually, made some unfounded, again, unsubstantiated statements about how sodium ion was on the far distant horizon, but that's actually not true. And there's so much information out there in terms of the research that is being funded by the Department of Energy at the federal level, this LENS consortium at the federal level, and the long duration storage that I know you, Becky, have been looking into at the state level, $270 million for that, and $50 million from the federal level for the LENS research. And then the biggest battery manufacturer in the world in China, CATL, in November of 2024, in an interview with Roeder, said, "We are converting because we expect the battery market that, by the way, this company dominates 40% of the battery market." They said in that interview in November of 2024 that they fully expect that upwards of 50% of the market will move to sodium in the near future. And that's
because
echoed
of
by
the
statements
fires
coming out of the International Energy Agency. That they're saying we have to transition to another battery, not just lithium. I was going to point out one other thing. I guess I'm trying to highlight statements that are being made by people who are being offered to the public as very, very knowledgeable experts, and I'm just disturbed by statements that are made that are not knowledgeable. So I just wanted to highlight one other thing, or maybe a couple. So one thing Jacobson said was the Salton Sea that we're just discovering right now and starting to mine is, they're saying it can has enough lithium to build all the cars necessary in America. Well, that's great, but that's an incomplete statistic, because if you go online very readily, you can find out that the Salton Sea they're projecting may actually have enough lithium to build 375 million cars. But then when you research and ask how long would it take to sell 375 million cars in America, the answer comes up about 24 years. So, and that is what the International Energy Alliance of 29 countries that the United States is part of, they're also saying the same thing. Careful with dedicating lithium, applying it to everything, because it's finite and it's not going to last forever, no matter how many mines we find. And then I guess the only other one I wanted to point out was the statement, the repeated statement, these fires are going to be very rare and very small. And then that was kind of connected to the statement, well, they're keeping track of these fires, but I don't know exactly who's keeping track of them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is coming from an expert. And so we know that these fires have not been tracked adequately. And really the only body tracking them is the EPRI database out of Palo Alto, and they don't have all the fires. And a question I personally have come up with recently is on the EPRI database, there's a huge lack of information about which type of battery burned in the fire. It's not reported. And so I was wondering, for instance, in the CPUC's GO 167, their order, right? Did that include that it's mandatory not just to report the fire within 24 hours, but also report the type of battery that burned? I don't know that answer, but it's critically important that we start tracking what kind of batteries are burning, just so that we actually have substantiated statistics with the right information. And then the other comment about fire that he put out there was all fires are really equally toxic. I've never heard anything like that before. So, so there was a follow-up article in the Sentinel that featured
today.
The
That's
lead,
today's Sentinel.
Yesterday or today, that featured the lead marketing face of New Leaf Energy, the renewable company that is applying to build the first BESS at 90 Minto Road here near College Lake outside of Watsonville. He stated that they are responding to county questions about their initial application, and simultaneously parallel to that, the county is finalizing their draft energy storage combining district ordinance, which they drafted originally back in August and October of 2024 and then never finished. And he said they're finalizing it and they're working on a final version, and that they're going to be reconsidering that or considering it on September 9th. But the county actually has not made that statement to anyone. It actually has made a contradictory statement to our group that no final version is actually being worked on until the results of the Vistra fire investigation at Moss Landing are done and the fire codes are updated this summer. So I have a call in to the county to see if we can get a confirmation about that information, but I guess those are the main things I wanted to point out. I am very, very grateful for the opportunity for this kind of public exchange, but I'm also really concerned about the industry narrative and how incomplete it is and how skewed it is.
Mm-hmm. As am I, Nina. I was very shocked by some of the statements I heard the Professor Jacobson say, and also Mr. O'Neill from 3CE. And I thought it was very disingenuous for them to be so dismissive of what happened in Moss Landing and to
I was
minimize.
Shocked by that. Repeatedly dismissive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to repeatedly say, well, there are 70,000 deaths a year in California alone due to fossil fuels, but without any...
12,000, Becky. 12,000 is the number he cited.
12,000 in California, without any substantiation. No backup of where did you get that? How did you come up with that number? And to learn now, because of what I heard you say, and unfortunately we've lost Brian. He was driving and going through a bad area, but maybe he'll call back. To learn that 3CE is actively supporting lithium battery energy storage projects in Monterey County. You mentioned it, the Clearway project. And do you want to talk with our audience a little bit about that and how what you've learned? I did some research today, too.
Yeah, I actually ran across this earlier this year when we were first starting up. And then I just kind of left it alone for now because of the overwhelming scope of the tragedy and the disaster and the mess that's unfolding. in that community. I didn't pursue that. And then also we were really focused on trying to form a response here in this county, but yes, I've been aware for a couple of months at least that apparently, so 3CE, sometime
And
late
for
last
the
year, I believe it
audience,
was
define
also November.
3CE. We should define 3CE for the audience. Not everybody knows.
Okay.
3CE is the acronym for Central Coast Community Energy. It's an aggregate power authority that they go by 3CE that spans from Santa Cruz County. It actually began here in Santa Cruz County as Monterey Bay Community Energy and then expanded and is now all the way down to Santa Barbara. 3CE, and they have board meetings. They have that are open to the public, and we really need to be going there now. So, Nina, I interrupted you, but please go ahead.
No, it's okay. Yes. So, sometime late last year, one of their lead top managers. She's a woman, and I'm so sorry, but I don't have her name right now. I can maybe follow up during another call because I'm fairly certain we'll be talking more about 3CE's role in this in the future. But she gave an interview to the press in which she stated that 3CE has made a policy decision to invest in procuring renewable, well, they're calling it clean and renewable energy, which is a mucky term. You can't call lithium battery storage clean, although you can call it renewable. There's a lot of this kind of thing where terms are being used interchangeably that are not really interchangeable. Anyway, she made the statement that 3CE has made a policy decision to procure as much renewable energy from new built battery energy storage facilities and specifically from lithium ion battery energy storage facilities. And so there's a couple of longer articles online from, one is in Energy Storage News and the other one is in a publication called Battery Industry that detail how 3CE has signed an exclusivity agreement with Clearway Energy Group, as they're called, I think. So 3CE and Clearway Energy Group signed an agreement, a deal, which is an exclusivity agreement, and also it's acronymed ESEA, and also an offtake agreement, that kind of an exclusive offtake agreement, which basically means that when this facility is built, the energy is reserved for 3CE. That's kind of an oversimplification, but that's what it means. And 3CE is doing this because access to renewable energy is becoming competitive. And so they're trying to plan ahead and make sure that they have what they need. And in and of itself, none of this is bad. And I guess I need to kind of make that clear. I feel like maybe I didn't make it clear enough at the meeting, the public panel that the Commission on the Environment hosted. We're not opposed to battery energy storage, and we are also 100% conscious, aware, and concerned about climate change and the rising temperatures of the oceans and of the atmosphere. We are very concerned about that, and we support renewable energy, even more so clean renewable energy, and we support battery energy storage, especially in California, since that is probably the most viable solution for like renewable energy here, as opposed to hydro. But the thing is, we cannot support lithium-based battery energy storage, and that is the crux of the issue. And like you said earlier, 3CE made a very powerful statement at this meeting that they see no reason to wait. They
Yeah.
do not want to wait for a newer kind of battery, but then they also indicated that they did not have the latest information on sodium ion developments and research and its projected availability soon. They did not have access to that information, and neither did Professor Jacobson. So
that was a surprise to
yeah.
me. In an email, he responded, I didn't have time to ask that question of him if he were aware of that, the 6 workshop symposiums that California Energy Commission held last year, outlining one of them on in November. An expert from Sandia National Labs outlined all of the different alternatives and where they were in terms of development. But I emailed, or Chris Damhorst helped me email that question to Dr. Jacobson, and he responded very quickly that no, he was not even aware of that. And he's supposed to be a world expert, and here he is making these claims that are wrong, as if it is. And anyway, I've interrupted you because it was incredulous to me. But going back to the Clearway project in Monterey County, it's 3CE is working with Holman, Holman, Holman LLC, a very large land developer in Monterey County. I looked up the document, and it is due, this project they're counting on would come online in 2032, specifying lithium.
Yeah. But it's, I mean, you researched the Holman, right, developer,
Yes.
but the agreement is signed with somebody called Clearway Energy Group.
Yes.
So sometimes there's the renewable energy developer, and then along with them is the money, or sometimes the developer and the energy group are working side by side. That's the case with New Leaf Energy. They're working side by side with Sequoia Energy One LLC, which is actually owned by a Canadian company called Potential Renewables, and Potential Renewables is owned by a very, very large Canadian company called the Power Company of Canada, a huge multi-billion-dollar company. So I think that often happens, that the renewable energy developer, the installer, is actually working with someone else, and there's different combinations of that. So there's a lot to learn.
So you're describing.
So this is for. Sorry.
Oh, well, you're describing the setup here for the Seahawk Energy System, storage system at 19 Minto Road. And that is in the permitting process. For those of you listening, that is at 19 Minto Road in Watsonville off of Green Valley Road, is in the permitting process. There are 2 other sites that the County Board of Supervisors has identified. One is, as Brian referred to, next to Aptos High School on Freedom Boulevard in Aptos, and the other is on Paul Sweet Road, immediately adjacent to Dominican Hospital. So, Nina, we are at about 7 minutes out from the top of the hour. Do you want to talk with our audience about the public meeting that Stop Lithium BESS in Santa Cruz County is organizing?
Absolutely. Just very quickly and simply, we are holding our 3rd public meeting on July 17th between 6:30 and 8:30 in the evening. It's going to be kind of in mid-city, mid-Santa Cruz City, at the Live Oak Annex, which is a little additional library complex that has been built into the Simpkins Family Swim Center. So to simplify, you could say it's at the Family Simpkins Swim Center, and you just walk into the main building, and to your left, there's an opened area that's been built that has study rooms and also very big meeting rooms. And so we're in the meeting room A in the Live Oak Annex at the Simpkins Family Swim Center. And that's July 17th on Thursday between 6:30 and 8:30 p.m. And we are we're hoping and planning to collect a small panel of experts in the environmental risks, health, safety, and environmental risks associated with lithium BESS facilities. And then I also just wanted to say that there is going to be a second public panel workshop that the Commission on the Environment is hosting at the end of July after our meeting. That would be July 30th, and it's going to focus on BESS and battery safety. And so we will have a lot of questions for that particular meeting as well. But again, we are meeting on July 17th at the Live Oak Annex at the Simpkins Family Swim Center in Room A between 6:30 and 8:30. And please join us. These meetings are mostly informational. That's what they're for, to just get the word out and answer questions from the public.
Very good. And this is the third such public informational meeting that Stop Lithium BESS in Santa Cruz County, a grassroots group again, just like Never Again Moss Landing, has formed because this is a serious risk coming into our neighborhoods. Never Again Moss Landing has experienced what happened and is not getting help from the local governments. Santa Cruz County is poised to adopt an ordinance allowing these into our county in these three places. This is going on statewide, and 3CE, Central Coast Community Energy, is supporting it by funding this Holman Clearway development in Monterey County. We do not know how involved they are in the Seahawk energy system at 90 Minto Road, but they are definitely supportive of lithium energy storage. And we have to speak up, people. Come to these meetings and learn. Nina, what are other ways people can find information by website searches and things to learn more about what the group is doing?
Okay, so we have a Facebook that you could just find the Facebook by typing in Stop Lithium BESS in Santa Cruz County. And we also have a website now. It's got a couple of pages that we're still working on, but it is a great website. It is better on a laptop or desktop than it is on a phone, but we will write that very quickly. And it's a great website. It has tons of information on it about all the different aspects of the County of Santa Cruz's plans for these three sites.
Yes, thank you.
And that website is just www.stoplithiumbessinSantaCruz.org.
And you have to type it all out because it's a pretty new website, and it may not come up if you just enter in a few search words. Is that still so, Nina?
Well, it depends for everybody. Like, it comes up for me right away, but I keep searching for it right away, right? So it depends.
Okay.
So it's www.stoplithiumbessinSantaCruz.org.
Very good. Thank you. I'm sorry that we lost Brian Roeder. Also, go visit the Never Again Moss Landing website. It is also a very good website with a lot of information, how you can link in and get help, join with your neighbors, get help with response to injuries, damage that you have experienced if you did in the Moss Landing fire. I will say that on July 11th, I will not be here in the studio next Friday, that's July 4th, but the following Friday, July 11th, I will be here, and Skylar from GreenAction will be one of my guests, so do tune in. Nina, I want to thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
I really appreciate
you. Thank you for having me.
You and many others who have linked arms with you to work together to get information out to the people. Our local government is silent on all of this, and that is disturbing in and of itself. So with that, I will say thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. We're off the air. Hello.